The stagecoach door opened, and what emerged was not a woman but a skeleton wrapped in pale skin and tattered calico. Warren Ashford felt his throat tighten as he watched the creature who was supposed to be his mail order bride nearly collapse onto the dusty street of Placitas, New Mexico, her hollow eyes struggling to focus in the harsh September sunlight of 1882. He had expected someone thin from the journey perhaps, but this was something else entirely, something that spoke of deliberate cruelty and systematic starvation that made his hands curl into fists at his sides. Miss Teresa Fletcher. His voice came out gentler than he intended as he stepped forward, catching her elbow when she swayed dangerously. Through the worn fabric of her dress, he could feel every bone in her arm, sharp and prominent like the skeleton of a bird. She turned those enormous eyes toward him, and he saw fear there, raw and consuming, the kind of fear that came from months or maybe years of abuse. "Yes, sir," she whispered, her voice barely carrying over the sound of the stagecoach horses stamping their feet. "Are you Warren Ashford?" "I am." He kept his hand light on her arm, afraid he might break something if he held too tight. Up close, he could see the way her collarbones jutted out above the neckline of her dress, the way her cheeks had hollowed until her face looked skull-like, the way her wrists were so thin he could have circled them with his thumb and forefinger. "Let me get your trunk." "I have no trunk, sir." The admission seemed to shame her, and she looked down at her feet, which he now noticed were wrapped in cloth instead of proper shoes. "I have only what I am wearing." Warren felt anger kindle in his chest, hot and fierce. He had sent money for her journey, enough for proper provisions and clothing. Someone had stolen it, or worse, someone had kept her from using it. "That is no matter," he said, forcing his voice to remain calm. "We will get you what you need. Can you walk to my horse?" She nodded, but when she took a step, her knees buckled. Warren caught her before she hit the ground, sweeping her up into his arms with ease that alarmed him. She weighed nothing, absolutely nothing, less than a sack of grain or a newborn calf. Her body went rigid with fear at first, but she was too weak to struggle. "I am not going to hurt you," he said quietly, carrying her toward where his mare stood tied to the hitching post outside the general store. "I am going to take you home and get some food into you. That is all." "I am sorry," she breathed against his shoulder. "I am sorry I am not what you expected. If you want to send me back, I understand." "Send you back?" Warren stopped walking and looked down at her. "To whatever hell starved you half to death. I would sooner cut off my own arm." "You are here now, and you are going to be safe. That is a promise." Tears welled up in her eyes and spilled over, tracking down her hollow cheeks. She did not make a sound as she cried, which told him more about her past than any words could have. He settled her carefully onto his horse, then swung up behind her, keeping one arm securely around her waist. She felt like she might blow away in the wind that swept down from the Sandia Mountains, carrying the scent of pinon and sage across the high desert landscape. The ride to his ranch took 20 minutes, and by the time they arrived, Teresa had fallen into an exhausted sleep against his chest. Warren's ranch hands, Miguel and his son Carlos, looked up from their work repairing a fence, and their eyes widened at the sight of the woman in his arms. "Get Rosa," Warren called to Carlos as he dismounted, carefully cradling Teresa. Rosa was Miguel's wife, who helped with the cooking and cleaning at the ranch house. "Tell her to prepare the guest room and heat water for a bath." Carlos took off running toward the small adobe house where his family lived on the property. Miguel approached, his weathered face creased with concern. "Patron, is she sick, starved?" Warren said grimly. "I need you to ride into town and fetch Doc Harrison. Tell him it is urgent, but not the usual kind of urgent. Tell him a woman needs help recovering from severe malnutrition." Miguel nodded and headed for the stable. Warren carried Teresa into the ranch house, a sprawling single-story adobe structure with thick walls that kept it cool in summer and warm in winter. He had built it himself over the past 5 years, ever since he had claimed this land and started raising cattle. The rooms were simply furnished but comfortable, and he had prepared the guest room with care after receiving Teresa's letter agreeing to become his bride. Rosa arrived within minutes, her round face full of maternal concern. She took one look at Teresa and crossed herself. "Dios mío, that poor child! What has been done to her?" "I do not know yet," Warren said, laying Teresa gently on the bed. "Can you help her bathe and get her into something clean? I will start making food." "You will make food?" Rosa's eyebrows rose. "Patron, I should cook for her." "I need to do this," Warren said, and Rosa must have heard something in his voice because she simply nodded. "Make a broth, something light that will not upset her stomach, and when Doc Harrison arrives, make sure he understands she needs careful treatment." Warren left Rosa to tend to Teresa and went to the kitchen. His hands shook slightly as he started a fire in the stove and put a pot of water on to boil. He had never felt so angry and so helpless at the same time. Teresa's letters had been brief and polite, giving him no indication of the suffering she endured. She had written that she was an orphan living with a distant cousin's family in Kansas, that she wished to marry and start a new life out west. The letters had been in a neat, educated hand that suggested refinement. They had revealed nothing of abuse or starvation. He cut vegetables from the garden, carrots and onions and celery, and added them to the pot with a ham bone. The scent of the simmering broth filled the kitchen as afternoon light slanted through the windows. Warren found himself moving mechanically, his mind churning with questions. Who had done this to her? Why had she not told him in her letters? What kind of hell had she been living in that made her agree to marry a complete stranger and travel 1,000 miles to do it? Doc Harrison arrived as the sun was beginning to lower toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. He was a lean man in his 60s with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. Warren met him at the door and led him to the guest room, where Rosa had finished helping Teresa bathe and change into one of the nightgowns Warren had ordered from the catalog. Teresa was awake but barely, propped up against pillows, her damp hair spread around her shoulders. Even clean and in fresh clothing, she looked desperately fragile. Doc Harrison set down his bag and approached the bed with the gentle manner of someone who knew how to handle frightened creatures. "Miss Fletcher, I am Doc Harrison. Mr. Ashford asked me to come check on you. May I examine you?" She nodded mutely, and the doctor proceeded to conduct a thorough examination while Warren waited in the hall with Rosa. After what felt like an eternity, Doc Harrison emerged, closing the door quietly behind him. "She is severely malnourished," he said without preamble. "I would estimate she has lost at least 30 or 40 pounds from what should be her healthy weight. Her body is consuming its own muscle tissue to survive. She has several partially healed rib fractures and evidence of long-term physical abuse. Her feet are in terrible condition, blistered and infected from walking without proper shoes. It is frankly a miracle she is alive." Warren's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. "What do I need to do?" "Feed her, but carefully. Small amounts frequently rather than large meals. Broth is good to start, then gradually introduce soft foods, eggs, porridge, cooked vegetables. It will take months to get her back to a healthy weight. Keep her clean and warm. The infections on her feet need to be treated daily. I will leave you with medicine and bandages." Doc Harrison fixed Warren with a penetrating stare. "She is also severely traumatized. Whatever was done to her was not just physical. She needs safety and kindness as much as she needs food. She will have both, Warren said, for as long as it takes. The doctor left detailed instructions and promised to return in a week to check on Teresa's progress. After he departed, Warren went to the kitchen and ladled some of the broth into a bowl, making sure to include some of the soft, cooked vegetables. He carried it to the guest room and knocked softly before entering. Teresa was sitting up, her eyes tracking him warily as he approached. "Rosa said I should rest, but I wanted to thank you properly," she said. "You have been very kind when you had no obligation to be." "You are going to be my wife," Warren said, settling into the chair beside the bed with the bowl of broth. "I have every obligation. But more than that, you are a human being who has been badly hurt, and any decent person would help. Now, can you feed yourself or do you need help?" She reached for the bowl, but her hands trembled so badly that Warren gently took them and placed them back in her lap. "Let me help," he said. "There is no shame in it." He spooned the warm broth to her lips and she sipped it carefully. After 3 spoonfuls, tears started running down her face again. "I cannot remember the last time someone fed me," she whispered. "Not since before my parents died. How long ago was that?" Warren asked gently, offering her another spoonful. 6 years. I was 16. She swallowed the broth and closed her eyes. "They died of cholera within days of each other. My father's cousin and his wife took me in. They said it was charity that I owed them for their kindness. They made me work from dawn until late at night, cooking and cleaning and tending their children. They fed me scraps and locked me in the cellar when I did not work fast enough. When your advertisement came through the church network looking for a bride, Mrs. Dunmore saw it as an opportunity to be rid of me." Warren's free hand clenched on his knee. "Did they take the money I sent for your journey?" "Most of it. They gave me enough for the stagecoach ticket and nothing more. I had no food for the entire journey except what kind passengers shared. The shoes I owned fell apart on the walk to the stage depot, and Mrs. Dunmore said I did not deserve new ones." She opened her eyes and looked at him with something like wonder. "You are angry on my behalf." "Of course I am angry. What was done to you was evil and wrong. Most people said I should be grateful the Dunmores took me in at all, that I was a burden and should not complain. Most people are fools." Warren offered her more broth, and she took it. They continued in silence until she had consumed about half the bowl, then she shook her head. "I cannot eat more, my stomach feels full." "That is all right, you did well." Warren set the bowl aside. "We will try again in a few hours. For now you should sleep." "You are being so kind to me," she said softly, "even though I am not what you wanted. I know you wanted a wife who could work beside you, and I can barely stand." Warren reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. Her fingers were like twigs, fragile and cold. "What I wanted was a partner, someone to share my life with. You are going to heal, Teresa. You are going to grow strong. And when you do, we will decide together what our life looks like. But there is no rush and no pressure. Right now, all you need to do is rest and eat and let yourself recover." She stared at him as if he had spoken in a foreign language, as if kindness was something so alien she could not quite comprehend it. Then she nodded slowly and settled back against the pillows. Warren pulled the blanket up around her shoulders and stood. "I will be right down the hall if you need anything. Rosa will check on you through the night." "Warren," her voice stopped him at the door. "Thank you for not sending me back." "I would never send you back," he said firmly. "This is your home now, Teresa. You are safe here." He left the room and stood in the hallway for a long moment, letting the anger wash through him. Then he went out to the porch and stood looking out at the land he had worked so hard to build into something productive and beautiful. The Sandia Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks glowing pink in the last light of sunset. Somewhere in Kansas, there was a family who had tortured and nearly killed a young woman for years, and there was nothing he could do about it from here. But he could give Teresa a future, and that was exactly what he intended to do. The next weeks fell into a careful pattern. Warren woke before dawn each day and prepared soft foods for Teresa, scrambled eggs and porridge and stewed fruits. He fed her 6 small meals a day, always sitting patiently beside her bed and never pushing her to eat more than she could manage. Rosa helped with her daily care, cleaning and dressing the wounds on her feet, helping her bathe, changing her bedding. Doc Harrison visited weekly and expressed cautious optimism about her progress. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, Teresa began to change. The infections on her feet healed. A bit of color returned to her cheeks. She stopped flinching every time Warren entered the room. She began to stay awake for longer periods, and Warren would sit with her in the evenings, reading aloud from books or telling her about the ranch. 3 weeks after her arrival, Teresa asked if she could sit outside for a while. Warren carried her to the porch and settled her in the rocking chair with blankets tucked around her. She tilted her face up to the October sun and closed her eyes, and Warren saw something like peace settle over her features. "I had forgotten how beautiful the sky is," she said softly. "The Dunmores kept me inside almost all the time." Warren settled into the chair beside her. "You can sit out here whenever you like. The air is good for you." They sat in companionable silence, watching Miguel and Carlos work with the horses in the corral. The high desert air was crisp and clean, scented with sage and the last of the autumn wildflowers. "Can I ask you something?" Teresa said after a while. "Anything. Why did you want a mail-order bride? You seem like a good man with a successful ranch." "Surely there were women in town who would have married you." Warren considered his answer carefully. "I suppose there might have been, but the truth is I am not much good at courting. I am better with cattle and horses than I am with people. And I wanted someone who understood what it meant to come out here with nothing and build something from the ground up. Someone who wanted a real partnership, not just security or status. And you thought a desperate orphan would be that person." There was no accusation in her voice, only curiosity. "I thought someone brave enough to travel across the country to start a new life might be that person. And I was right, was I not? You survived years of abuse and still had the courage to leave. That takes strength, Teresa." She turned to look at him, really look at him, for what felt like the first time. "You truly believe that?" "I do. I always thought of myself as weak, for not fighting back, for not running away sooner." "You survived," Warren said firmly. "Survival is not weakness. It is the strongest thing you could have done." Tears glimmered in her eyes, but she blinked them away and turned her gaze back to the mountains. "I want to believe you," she whispered. "Then believe me, and keep eating and growing stronger, and one day you will feel it in your bones." A month after her arrival, Teresa took her first steps without assistance. Warren stood ready to catch her as she wobbled across the bedroom floor, but she made it all the way to the chair by the window and sank into it with a triumphant smile that transformed her face. "I did it," she said, breathless and grinning. "I walked." "You did," Warren agreed and found himself grinning back. It was the first time he had seen her truly smile, and the sight of it did something strange to his chest, made his heart skip and his breath catch. She was still too thin, her cheekbones still too prominent, but the life was coming back into her eyes, and she was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with physical appearance and everything to do with spirit. "What?" she asked, and he realized he was staring. "Nothing. I am just happy for you." She studied him with those intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "You have been very patient with me. I know I must be a burden, keeping you from your work." "You are not a burden. Miguel and Carlos can handle the daily work, and I am exactly where I want to be." It was true, Warren realized. He had found himself looking forward to their meals together, to their evening conversations, to the quiet moments of watching her grow stronger. Somewhere along the way, this arrangement that had started as a practical solution to loneliness had become something more, something that felt dangerously close to tenderness. As November arrived and brought cooler temperatures to the high desert, Teresa grew strong enough to walk around the house without help. She began joining Warren and Rosa in the kitchen, at first just watching and then gradually helping with small tasks, peeling vegetables or stirring pots. Her hands were steadier now, and she had gained enough weight that her dresses no longer hung on her like sacks. "You do not have to work," Warren reminded her one evening as she insisted on helping Rosa prepare dinner. "You are still recovering." "I want to help," Teresa said. "I have spent so long being helpless. It feels good to be useful again, but this time by choice rather than force." He understood that, so he let her do what she wanted as long as she did not overexert herself. He bought her new dresses from the catalog and boots that fit properly. He ordered books because he had noticed the hungry way she looked at his small collection. When they arrived, she held them like treasures and thanked him with such genuine emotion that he found himself wanting to buy her the entire world. They had not yet discussed marriage beyond that first day. The Reverend who traveled through Placidas once a month to hold services had been told the wedding was postponed due to the bride's health. The townsfolk were curious but respectful enough not to pry. Warren knew he needed to raise the subject eventually, but he found himself reluctant to pressure Teresa, when she had so recently escaped a situation where she had no choices. The decision was taken out of his hands one evening in late November as they sat together in the parlor after dinner. Warren was reading livestock reports while Teresa worked on some mending. She had insisted on earning her keep somehow, and sewing was something she could do while sitting. "Warren," she said suddenly, setting down her needle, "we should talk about our marriage." He looked up from his papers. "All right. You have been more than kind to me, more than anyone has been in years. You have asked nothing of me and given me everything. But I know this arrangement was meant to be a marriage, and we have been living in limbo." She twisted her hands in her lap, nervous but determined. "If you have changed your mind about wanting to marry me, I will understand. You could help me find a position in town, perhaps as a seamstress or teacher. I have some education and I am strong enough now to work." "Is that what you want?" Warren asked carefully. "To find a position in town?" "I am asking what you want." He set aside his papers and leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "What I want is to marry you, if that is what you want as well. But not because you feel obligated or because you think you owe me. I want you to choose this freely, Teresa. You have had enough of your life dictated by others." She met his eyes steadily. "What if I told you that I want to marry you, but I am afraid?" "Afraid of what?" "Afraid that I do not know how to be a wife. Afraid that I will disappoint you. Afraid that once we are married, you will change and become like—" She trailed off, but he understood, "like the Dunmores." He said it flatly, and she nodded. Warren stood and crossed to where she sat, kneeling beside her chair so they were at eye level. "Teresa, I cannot promise I will never make mistakes or never disappoint you. But I can promise that I will never hurt you deliberately, never starve you or lock you up or make you feel small. I can promise that if you choose to marry me, it will be a partnership where your voice matters as much as mine." "How can you promise that?" "Because that is the kind of man my parents raised me to be. Because I watched my father treat my mother with respect and love every day of their lives together. Because the thought of someone hurting you makes me angrier than I have been in years." He reached out slowly and took her hand, feeling the calluses that had formed from her years of forced labor. I know you have no reason to trust easily, but I am asking you to trust me. And if you cannot yet, that is all right. We can wait as long as you need." Teresa looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. "I think I am beginning to trust you," she said softly. "You have shown me nothing but kindness, and I find that I do want to marry you, not because I have nowhere else to go, but because I want to build a life with you. You are certain as I can be, but Warren, I need you to know that I am not whole yet. There are nights when I have nightmares, times when I flinch at sudden movements. I do not know if I will ever be the person I might have been if my parents had lived." "None of us are the people we might have been," Warren said. "We are the people we are, shaped by everything we have lived through. And the person you are, Teresa, is strong and brave and someone I would be honored to call my wife." She smiled then, tremulous but real. "Then yes, I will marry you." Warren felt something unfurl in his chest, warm and bright. He had not expected this, had not expected to feel anything beyond friendly companionship for his mail-order bride. But somewhere between those first terrifying moments when she had emerged from the stagecoach more dead than alive, and now, he had fallen halfway in love with her courage and her quiet strength, and the way she was determined to heal herself. They married the following week when the circuit reverend came through Placida's. It was a simple ceremony in the small adobe church, with Rosa, Miguel, and Carlos as witnesses. Teresa wore a new dress of deep blue that brought out the color slowly returning to her cheeks. She had gained enough weight that her face had filled out, softening the harsh angles, and her hair, washed and brushed until it shone, was pinned up with small white flowers that Rosa had helped her arrange. Warren wore his best suit and tried not to stare too obviously at his bride. When the Reverend asked if he took Teresa to be his lawfully wedded wife, his "I do" rang out clear and firm. Teresa's voice wavered only slightly on her own vows, and when Warren slipped the simple gold band on her finger, her eyes were bright with tears that looked like happiness. They held a small celebration at the ranch afterward, with a meal that Rosa had spent days preparing. Teresa ate more than Warren had ever seen her consume, and the sight of it filled him with quiet satisfaction. She was healing, growing stronger every day, and now she was his wife. That night, as they prepared for bed, Warren gave Teresa the privacy of the bedroom while he stood on the porch and tried to calm his nerves. They had not discussed the physical aspects of marriage, and he had no intention of pushing her into anything she was not ready for. She had been through too much, needed more time to heal both physically and emotionally. When he finally entered the bedroom, Teresa was sitting on the edge of the bed in her nightgown, her hands folded in her lap. She looked up at him with apprehensive eyes. "I know what is expected on a wedding night," she said quietly, "and I will not refuse you. You are my husband." Warren crossed to her and knelt down, just as he had that night when they had agreed to marry. "Teresa, I do not want you to feel obligated to do anything. We have all the time in the world. There is no rush. You do not want me." "That is not what I said. But wanting you and acting on it are two different things. You are still recovering, still learning to feel safe. I can wait until you are ready." She studied his face for a long moment. "You mean that?" "I do. You truly are unlike any man I have known." She reached out and touched his cheek, a feather-light brush of her fingers. "But I think I would like you to hold me, if that is all right. I have been alone for so long." "That is more than all right," Warren said softly. He stood and climbed into bed, and Teresa settled beside him, her head resting on his shoulder. He wrapped his arms around her carefully, still mindful of how fragile she had been not so long ago. She sighed and relaxed against him, her breath evening out. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what? For being patient, for being kind, for giving me a chance to be something other than a victim." Warren pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "You were never just a victim, Teresa. You were always a survivor. I just gave you a safe place to land." She fell asleep in his arms, and Warren lay awake for a long time, listening to her breathe and feeling the warmth of her body against his. He had thought he was rescuing her when he brought her to his ranch, but he was beginning to suspect she was rescuing him just as much. The loneliness he had lived with for so long was fading, replaced by something warmer and more substantial. He was not just building a ranch anymore. He was building a home, and Teresa was the heart of it. Winter settled over New Mexico with cold nights and bright, clear days. Warren continued to work the ranch with Miguel and Carlos, repairing fences and tending the cattle that grazed on the winter-brown grasslands. Teresa grew steadily stronger, taking on more of the household management and surprising him with her efficiency and intelligence. She kept careful records of supplies and expenses, reorganized the pantry, and started a small herb garden near the kitchen door that she promised would be ready for spring planting. They fell into an easy rhythm together, working side by side during the day and spending their evenings by the fire. Warren taught Teresa to play chess, and she beat him within 2 weeks, her sharp mind quickly grasping the strategy. She read voraciously, going through his collection of books and asking him to order more. They talked about everything, from politics to philosophy to the best way to train horses, and Warren found himself looking forward to those conversations as much as he had once looked forward to solitude. Slowly, carefully, their relationship deepened. Teresa stopped flinching when he touched her. She began to initiate casual affection, a hand on his arm, a kiss on his cheek when he came in from work. At night, they held each other, and the comfort of it eased something in both of them that had been tense for too long. It was a cold night in January, with wind howling around the house and rattling the shutters when things between them changed. They had gone to bed as usual, Warren holding Teresa while she drifted towards sleep. But tonight she was restless, shifting against him. "Warren." Her voice was soft in the darkness. "Yes. I have been thinking about what you said on our wedding night, about waiting until I was ready." She propped herself up on her elbow, looking down at him. In the faint moonlight filtering through the window, he could see the curve of her cheek, the fall of her hair around her shoulders. "I think I am ready now. I want to truly be your wife." Warren's heart kicked up its pace. "Are you certain? There is still no rush." "I am certain. You have been so patient with me, and I do not want to wait any more. I want this, Warren. I want you." He reached up and cupped her cheek, feeling the warmth of her skin. "Then I am yours," he said simply, and drew her down into a kiss. It was gentle and careful, both of them mindful of her still healing body, but it was also sweet and real. Teresa trembled in his arms, but it was not fear. It was anticipation and nervousness and something that might have been joy. Warren took his time, treating her with all the tenderness she deserved, showing her with every touch and kiss that she was valued and cherished. Afterward, Teresa cried, but when he asked if he had hurt her, she shook her head. "These are happy tears," she whispered. "I never thought I could feel like this. Safe and wanted and cherished. Thank you for showing me that not all people are cruel." Warren held her close, feeling something shift and settle in his chest. It was love, he realized. Not the tentative affection of the past months, but real, deep love for this woman who had survived so much and still found the courage to open her heart. "I love you," he said, the words coming easily because they were true. "I do not know when it happened, but somewhere along the way I fell completely in love with you." She pulled back to look at him, her eyes shining. "I love you too. I have been too afraid to say it, afraid you might not feel the same, but I do. I love you, Warren." They held each other through the night, and when Warren woke with the first light of dawn, he found Teresa already awake, watching him with a soft smile. "Good morning, husband," she said. "Good morning, wife," he replied, and kissed her until they were both breathless and laughing. As winter gradually gave way to spring, Teresa bloomed like the wildflowers that carpeted the high desert. She had gained back all the weight she had lost and more, her body filling out with healthy curves. Her skin glowed with health, her hair shone, and her eyes had lost that haunted look that had broken his heart when she first arrived. She was beautiful, but more than that, she was happy. They worked together on the ranch, Teresa proving to have a natural way with animals. She helped Warren train a new filly, speaking to the horse in soft, soothing tones that gentled the wild creature. She learned to ride and spent her mornings exploring the land, coming back with stories of what she had seen, the red rock formations and ancient petroglyphs, the wildlife that thrived in the seeming emptiness. In April, Teresa missed her monthly courses, and Doc Harrison confirmed what they had both suspected. She was pregnant. Warren felt a surge of joy and terror in equal measure. The thought of becoming a father filled him with wonder, but he also worried about Teresa, about whether her body had healed enough to safely carry a child. "I am going to be fine," Teresa assured him, reading his concerns in his face. "Doc Harrison said I am healthy and strong. My body has recovered. You were near death less than a year ago, and now I am very much alive." She took his hands and placed them on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby, Warren, a child born out of love, not obligation or fear. That is a miracle." He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. "You are the miracle," he said roughly. "You and your strength and your courage. I am the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the spring and summer. Teresa remained active and healthy, her body taking to the changes with ease. She sewed baby clothes and prepared the small room next to their bedroom as a nursery. Warren built a cradle from pine wood, sanding it smooth and rubbing it with beeswax until it gleamed. They spent long evenings making plans for the future, talking about what they would teach their child, what values they wanted to instill. Teresa wanted their children to know they were loved unconditionally, that they would always have a safe home. Warren wanted them to grow up understanding hard work and responsibility, but also kindness and compassion. In late September, exactly 1 year after Teresa had arrived in Placitas, she went into labor. Rosa came to help, and Doc Harrison arrived within an hour of being summoned. Warren spent the longest night of his life pacing the porch while Teresa labored inside, her occasional cries of pain making him want to tear down the door and demand to help somehow. Finally, as dawn was breaking over the mountains, he heard a new sound, the thin, angry wail of a newborn. Warren nearly broke down the door in his haste to get inside. Rosa met him in the hallway, beaming. "You have a son, patron, a big, healthy boy, and Teresa is fine, tired but fine." Warren pushed past her into the bedroom. Teresa was propped up against pillows, looking exhausted and radiant, holding a bundle wrapped in soft blankets. She looked up as he entered, and her smile could have lit the entire territory. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Warren approached on shaking legs and looked down at the small, red, wrinkled face of his child. The baby had stopped crying and was looking around with unfocused dark eyes, his tiny mouth working. "He is perfect," Warren breathed. "You are amazing. How are you feeling?" "Tired, but happy." "So very happy." She shifted the baby so Warren could hold him. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names over the past months, but nothing had felt quite right. Warren looked down at his son, feeling the solid, reassuring weight of him. "What about Robert, after my father?" Robert James Ashford. Robert, Teresa repeated, trying it out. Yes, I like that. Hello, Robert. Welcome to the world. The baby made a small sound and they both laughed, the kind of exhausted, joyful laughter that came from too little sleep and too much emotion. Warren sat carefully on the edge of the bed, one arm around Teresa, the other supporting their son, and felt complete in a way he had never imagined possible. The months that followed were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Robert proved to be a good baby, eating well and sleeping in reasonable stretches. Teresa took to motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else, but Warren made sure she did not overwork herself. They hired a young woman from town, Sarah, to help with the heavier household tasks so Teresa could focus on the baby and her own recovery. Warren found himself marveling at every milestone. The first time Robert smiled, the way he tracked movement with his eyes, the strength of his grip on Warren's finger. He would sometimes watch Teresa nursing their son and feel overwhelmed by the sheer goodness of his life. A year and a half ago, he had been a lonely rancher. Now he had a wife he loved desperately and a son who represented their future. One evening in December, as they sat by the fire with Robert sleeping in his cradle nearby, Teresa looked over at Warren with a thoughtful expression. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, recognizing that look. "I was thinking about writing a letter to the marshal in Kansas," she said slowly. "Telling him about what the Dunmores did to me. I know it has been over a year, but perhaps something could be done." Warren set down the ledger he had been reviewing. "Do you want to do that? Part of me does. Part of me wants them to face consequences for what they did, but another part of me just wants to leave it in the past and focus on the future." "Both of those are valid," Warren said carefully. "But I will support whatever you decide." Teresa was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. "I think I will not write the letter," she said finally. "Not because they do not deserve punishment, but because I do not want to give them any more of my energy or my time. They took years of my life. I will not give them another moment. I would rather spend that time being happy with you and Robert." Warren crossed to her and pulled her up into his arms. "You are an extraordinary woman, Teresa Ashford." "I am just a woman who got very lucky," she said, but she was smiling as she said it. "Lucky that you were kind. Lucky that you saw me as a person worth saving." "You saved yourself," Warren reminded her. "You made the choice to leave, to travel all those miles into uncertainty. You chose to survive. I just gave you a safe place to do it." She kissed him, long and sweet, and Robert stirred in his sleep, making the small noises that meant he would wake soon. They pulled apart, laughing, and Teresa went to tend to their son while Warren stoked the fire and thought about how strange and wonderful life could be. The years passed with the kind of gentle rhythm that marked a good life. The ranch prospered, Warren's herd growing until he needed to hire additional hands to help manage it. Robert grew into a sturdy, cheerful toddler with his mother's dark hair and his father's gray eyes. He toddled after Warren whenever he was allowed, wanting to help with everything, and Teresa documented his progress in a journal she kept faithfully. When Robert was 2, Teresa became pregnant again. This time there was no fear, only joy and anticipation. The pregnancy was easy, and in the early summer of 1885, Teresa delivered a healthy daughter they named Margaret Rose, after Warren's mother. She had Teresa's delicate features and Warren's serious expression, and her big brother was immediately besotted with her. Life settled into a beautiful chaos of children and ranch work and the deep, abiding love between Warren and Teresa. They still had their evening conversations, though now they were often interrupted by small voices demanding attention or stories. They still held each other at night, though they were both exhausted more often than not. They had built something real and lasting, a family and a home that stood as a testament to the power of kindness and the resilience of the human spirit. On a warm September evening in 1887, 5 years after Teresa had first arrived in Placitas, she and Warren sat on the porch watching the sunset while their children played in the yard. Robert was teaching Margaret to catch grasshoppers, both of them laughing and running through the sage. Teresa's hand rested in Warren's, their fingers intertwined with the ease of long familiarity. "You ever think about what your life might have been like if you had not sent for a mail-order bride?" Teresa asked, her eyes on their children. "Sometimes," Warren admitted. "And then I thank God that I did. What about you? Do you think about what might have been?" "I try not to. That way lies darkness." She turned to look at him, and her eyes were clear and calm. "But sometimes I think about the girl who got off that stagecoach 5 years ago, so broken and afraid. And I am proud of her for being brave enough to take that step, even when she could not imagine what might be waiting on the other side. She had no idea she was about to meet the most stubborn man in New Mexico," Warren said lightly, and Teresa laughed. "Stubborn and kind. That is a rare combination." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I love you, Warren Ashford. Thank you for feeding me back to health. Thank you for giving me time to heal. Thank you for loving me." "Loving you was the easy part," Warren said, pressing a kiss to her hair. "You made it impossible not to." They sat together as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red and purple. The mountains stood dark against the fading light, eternal and unchanging. In the yard, Robert caught a grasshopper and brought it to show his sister, both of them examining it with the serious concentration of young children. Inside the house, dinner was waiting, and after the children were fed and bathed and tucked into bed, Warren and Teresa would have a few quiet hours together before sleep claimed them. It was a good life, a life neither of them had expected but both had worked hard to build. The mail-order bride who had arrived starved and broken had become a strong, confident woman and a loving mother. The lonely cowboy who had sent for a wife out of practicality had become a devoted husband and father. They had saved each other in all the ways that mattered, and in doing so, they had created something beautiful and enduring. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Warren pulled Teresa closer and thought about the future. There would be more children, perhaps, if they were blessed. There would be challenges and hardships, because that was the nature of life on a ranch in the high desert. There would be droughts and harsh winters and cattle that got sick and fences that needed mending. But there would also be love and laughter, and the quiet satisfaction of building something together. There would be mornings waking up beside the woman he loved and evenings watching their children grow. There would be a lifetime of moments, big and small, that added up to a marriage and a family and a home. Robert came running up to the porch, grasshopper cupped carefully in his hands. "Mama, Papa, look, it is the biggest one I found all day." Teresa examined the insect with appropriate seriousness, while Warren ruffled his son's dark hair. Margaret toddled up behind her brother, demanding to see, and they all crowded together on the porch, a family bound by love and choice and the determination to be better than the past that had shaped them. Later that night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Warren and Teresa lay in bed and talked about expanding the ranch, about hiring a teacher for Robert and eventually Margaret, about all the plans and dreams they had for the future. Teresa fell asleep mid-sentence, exhausted by the long day, and Warren lay awake for a while longer, listening to her breathe. He thought about that day 5 years ago when he had opened the stagecoach door and seen a woman more dead than alive. He thought about the anger he had felt, the helplessness, the determination to save her. He had not known then that he would fall in love with her, He had not known that she would become the center of his world, the mother of his children, his partner in every sense of the word. The ranch that had once seemed big and empty now felt full to bursting with life and love. The rooms that had echoed with silence now rang with children's laughter and Teresa's singing, and the sounds of a family going about their daily lives. Warren had thought he was content before Teresa arrived, but he had not known what contentment truly was until he had experienced this, the profound satisfaction of loving and being loved in return. Time continued its steady march forward. The children grew, Robert becoming a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the ranch and everything about it, Margaret a bright, curious girl who asked endless questions about everything she saw. Warren taught them to ride and rope, and all the skills they would need to thrive in this harsh but beautiful land. Teresa taught them to read and write and think critically about the world around them. They added more children to their family over the years. Another son they named Daniel in 1888 and twins. A boy and girl they named Samuel and Catherine in 1891. The house expanded to accommodate the growing family, new rooms added as needed. The ranch prospered beyond Warren's early dreams, becoming one of the most successful operations in the territory. But more than the material success, Warren treasured the life they had built together. Every meal shared around the big kitchen table, every evening spent with Teresa planning the next day's work, every night falling asleep beside the woman he loved more with each passing year. All of it added up to a richness that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with connection and purpose. Teresa thrived in ways that went beyond physical health. She became a leader in their small community, organizing a school for the ranch children in the area, starting a lending library, volunteering with the church when the circuit preacher came through. She never forgot where she had come from, and she made it her mission to help others who were struggling, taking in young women who needed work and treating them with dignity and respect. One day in the spring of 1892, a young woman arrived in Placitas, thin and frightened, fleeing from an abusive situation. Someone in town directed her to the Ashford ranch, saying that Mrs. Ashford helped women who needed it. Teresa took one look at the girl and saw herself 10 years earlier. She gave the young woman a job helping with the children and the household, fed her and clothed her, and showed her the same kindness Warren had shown Teresa all those years ago. Warren watched his wife work patiently with the frightened girl and felt his heart swell with pride and love. This was who Teresa was now, not a victim but a survivor who used her experience to help others. She had taken the worst thing that had ever happened to her and transformed it into compassion and strength. That evening, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Warren found Teresa on the porch looking out at the stars. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and she leaned back against him with a contented sigh. "You did a good thing today," he said quietly, "taking in that girl." "How could I not? She looked just like I did when I arrived, lost and scared and desperate." Teresa turned in his arms to face him. "You showed me what kindness looks like, Warren. I am just passing it on. You are remarkable, do you know that?" She smiled, the smile that still made his heart skip even after 10 years of marriage. "I am just a woman who was lucky enough to marry a good man. Everything else followed from that." "No," Warren said firmly. "You were remarkable long before you met me. You survived years of abuse. You found the courage to leave. You traveled across the country alone. You chose to heal and to grow and to love. That is all you, Teresa. I just gave you a safe place to do it." She kissed him then, long and sweet, and when they pulled apart, her eyes were bright with happy tears. "We saved each other," she said. "That is the truth of it. You saved me from the Dunmores, and I saved you from loneliness. We built this life together, and that is what makes it beautiful." Warren could not argue with that. They stood together on the porch, holding each other and looking out at the land they had worked so hard to make productive and beautiful. In the distance, the Sandia Mountains rose against the night sky, timeless and unchanging. Closer in, the ranch buildings stood solid and well-maintained, the corrals holding healthy horses, the pastures dotted with cattle. Inside the house, their 5 children slept safely in their beds, never knowing hunger or fear or abuse. It was everything Warren had ever wanted and more than he had ever dared to dream. The mail-order bride who had arrived starved and broken had become his partner, his lover, his best friend, the mother of his children, and the love of his life. Together, they had built not just a ranch but a legacy of kindness and resilience that would outlast them both. As they went inside and prepared for bed, Warren thought about the future stretching out before them. There would be more years of hard work and joy, of raising their children and watching them grow into adults. There would be grandchildren one day, God willing, and the satisfaction of seeing the family they had created spreading out and thriving. There would be challenges and sorrows because that was the nature of life, but they would face them together, as they had faced everything else, and through it all, there would be love. The deep, abiding love that had started with an act of kindness and grown into something that sustained and strengthened them both. The love that had taken a starving woman and a lonely man and transformed them into a family. The love that proved, every single day, that compassion and patience and genuine caring could heal even the deepest wounds. Warren climbed into bed beside Teresa and pulled her close, feeling her warmth and the steady beat of her heart. She sighed contentedly and settled against him, her body fitting perfectly against his after all these years. "I love you," he whispered into her hair. "I love you too," she murmured back, already half asleep. "Always and forever, always and forever." Warren smiled into the darkness and closed his eyes, grateful beyond measure for the strange and wonderful path that had led them to each other. The mail-order bride and the cowboy, the starving woman and the man who had fed her back to health, had become something more than either of them had been alone. They had become partners, lovers, friends, parents, and the architects of a life well lived. And as sleep claimed them both, the house settled into peaceful quiet around them, a home filled with love and light, standing strong against the vast New Mexico night.